just say this. This will be very
Sure.
refreshing because this is an exciting part of our economy. And Jeff, you know, he did. We had the opportunity working with him all the way back to Conaware when he was running a tech firm, and when we were sharing with him one time, said, you know, you might look at your next career moves as a portfolio of activities. He took that and redefined that, and you'll hear that as he goes through this information. And we're so glad that he dedicates himself to this sector because he's very talented, and he sticks with it. So, you know, he stayed with that. A lot of times you'll start with startups and then you'll kind of go up with it the later stage over the years, and he stays to help a very important part of our economy, and also is working with larger organizations. But Jeff Amerine, partner in Startup Junkie, and they've evolved. We're going to hear some of that, but I'll turn it over to you, Jeff.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it's not bad to be the king or in the king's court of the Isle of the Misfit Toys. So that's kind of the startup world.
Yeah.
But let me see if I can figure out how to get this shared here. And I'll pull up.
Thank you.
Sure.
Oh, and Sanker's in the house.
Let me get this. Hold on just one second. I'll get to.
While you're doing that, I'm just going to mention, you want to thank Shannon Bedore for helping us get to know Dr. Joe Thompson and have him over the months. Shannon was the key to that ever happening.
All right, let me see if I can find the present button here. There we go. These are always a little different. Can you see that okay? That coming through?
Coming, it's loading.
You think the speed of light could work faster? Okay. Yeah. There we go. Well, I'll go ahead and get started. So this one is titled Creating Startup Junkies, Building Sustainable Venture Ecosystems in Unexpected Places. And there's a reason for that. I'm going to talk a little bit towards the end about a book that myself and Dr. Jeff Stanrich, who's my business partner, and several members of our team have put together that's entitled exactly this, and it captures the lessons we've learned over the past 13 years of this journey. And so I'll talk a little bit about how we got here. And it's when reflecting back to some of the early conversations that I had when I first got to know Tim, when I came back to the state and I was working on a venture and then transitioning into doing some stuff at the university, and seeing this thing grow over the course of the last 13 to 15 years into something that's got a real chance of being special. It's been really something. And Tim played no small part in influencing my thinking in those early days, for sure. He would not admit that, but it's really true. So let's go ahead and see if we can advance the slide here. There we go. So what do we do? We'll talk a little bit about how we do that. The purpose, and I would like to say we're a purpose-driven organization, is across all the brands we operate, the Conductor and the Startup Junkie brands, and we'll talk about the difference there. The main purpose is to inspire, empower, and educate entrepreneurs, innovators, and makers. Those people that are disruptive to the status quo, that really ultimately make things better for those of us who are consuming either a business service, a new product, whatever the case may be. And so why do we do it? And I've used this particular statistic a lot over the years. And it turns out that Kauffman Foundation, and looking over the past 25 years, has come to the data-driven conclusion that 85% of all net new job creation comes from startups. And so it's important to have that creative destruction and that ongoing refresh of what we're doing in the economy, because that's where a lot of the new opportunity comes from. And if you also look the other side of that at the half-life, or the amount of duration that publicly traded companies actually have in being relevant, it's as short now as it ever has been. So the NYSE and the Dow companies, the turnover there in the last 25 or 30 years has been pretty spectacular, which lets you know that this idea of creating startups and viable small business is really how the economy gets refreshed. So the other thing is, in addition to that, they account for 99% of all employers and about 50% of all employees in the US, about 43% of all high-tech jobs. And have 13 times more patents per employee than many other employers. So it's an important segment. There's no question about it. But it's also risky. I mean, it's also fraught with peril. It's difficult. And the number one reason why these startup companies fail is because a lot of times they'll build something that nobody really wants. They haven't done a good job validating the demand. They were too in love with their idea, or they hired poorly, or maybe they didn't have focus. But the number one thing is they haven't built something that people really want to buy. And so part of our job is to intervene in that regard and to help them understand how is it that you get to understanding really legitimate demand. And there's tools such as the lean startup methodology, lean canvas, and customer discovery that force startup founders and small business owners to be a consultant to their own idea. And if they can be objective about that and not in love with it, then they'll come to a conclusion as to whether or not that new venture, that new product or service is something they should actually launch. And how we do that is first of all, the business model is an unsustainable business model we've sustained for 13 years. I wouldn't recommend it really to anybody, but it's worked for us. And that is that for companies that are pre-revenue to $15 to $20 million in sales, all of our services are completely free. And the only way we're able to pull that off is because we've got really great third-party funding from the federal government, the state government, foundations, and others, because they realize, based on those stats that I just showed, that this is kind of the Moneyball play for economic development. This is how you can build an economy that sticks in a particular area. And if you can intervene and be helpful in these early stages of business growth, then those companies can be sustained. They can get past the 5-year survival rate, and they're going to hire more and more high wage rate employees as they go. So entrepreneurs have lots of needs: mentoring, coaching, consulting. We do all that. The ecosystem needs to include things like networking, training, events, and workshops. And of course, you have to have access to capital. So this is kind of the background of what the entrepreneur needs and what we try to address. In some ways, you could think of the Startup Junkie and Conductor enterprise as a little bit McKinsey Consulting and a little bit of an event management company. And the whole idea is, in order to build that ecosystem, you really have to have both to get people engaged. And we like to think about it as 4 pillars. And if you know, when the book comes out in January, God willing, creek don't rise, so to speak, these are the key ideas within the book. This idea that the 4 pillars are talent, culture, community or community engagement, and then capital. And we built the whole premise in looking at new markets to go into around a gap assessment, if you will, on these 4 key pillars. And like I said, the only way that we're able to pull off what we do, given the unique structure of the business model, is by having great partners such as these and many others that have been able to fund or collaborate with us in pulling off what we do. These are some of the other major events and things that you would see from the Startup Junkie and Conductor brands. We run a couple of different accelerators, the Fuel Accelerator and the 10X Growth Accelerator. We operate the Makerspace down at UCA. We are the contracted executive director group for the newest angel organization in the state, the Archangel Alliance, which is in its early stages, but it's really trying to bring together great ventures, not just from in Arkansas, but from around the country, with accredited investors. We run events like Idea Fame. We put on the Health Sciences Boot Camp with UAMS, hackathons, global entrepreneurship. There's 250 different events that fit into these categories and more. And I have to say that during the pandemic, we had to take all this stuff, which was largely live, and in about 3 weeks, figure out how to make it virtual. And I can take no credit, but I can tell you, through having a highly motivated team, we did all that. And honestly, having to have sort of the sober realization that life was going to be much different, the team very quickly took us through a step we needed to do anyway, which was to build a lot of really pretty solid digital content and have it available out on a YouTube channel, through the podcasts that we've run for years, more than 200 episodes, and others. So it forced us to get to transition and to think a little differently. This is the makerspace that we operate in conjunction with UCA down right across the street from the main campus there. That's been pretty catalytic to new idea generation and creation, both from students and community down there. And that is the one maker-oriented facility and capability that we run. They've done some pretty cool stuff there, some really interesting sample projects, and have been responsive in addition to all the kind of fun stuff here and the myriad of things that you can do with laser cutters and 3D printers. And Jason Huselton, who runs that group, is a mechanical engineer and an artist, and just about anything you'd want to create down there he can help with. They were also extremely responsive in the early days of the pandemic in figuring out innovative ways to use 3D printing and other capabilities they had for PPE. So worked a lot on different solutions, a lot of outreach, and were integral parts of multiple different task force when there was a shortage of that kind of stuff. So where do we do it? The operating regions. The funding that we had historically from the Small Business Administration competitively selected Regional Innovation Cluster contract that we won some years back includes Northwest Arkansas, but also Northeast Oklahoma and one county in southern Missouri. This is the operating area for what was called the Ozarks Regional Innovation Cluster. The main of the Startup Junkie brand operates there, and it's in conjunction with the major brands, the university, and ourselves. But the whole idea is that was the enabling funding that really allowed us to do more and more outreach, provide more and more service, more and more workshops to the folks in the area. And there's been others as well. The Walton Family Foundation has been integral to this piece as well over the years. And then the conductor, which is based in Conway, really provides outreach and services to all of these counties in central Arkansas. Having said that, even though we have these sort of defined operating areas, we'll help anybody anywhere in the state, or for that matter, entrepreneurs that are outside of the state that need to figure out ways to connect to the large enterprises that are here in Arkansas. Anything that's essentially in the startup realm that is going to be beneficial to entrepreneurs, investors, or the large businesses in the state, we'll figure out how to be helpful in the services that we provide. So that's kind of the baseline. And I will say that the team is 25 people split between those two locations. The average age in the team, and I don't have the stat exactly, I'm the oldest of the old people on the team, and the average age is probably 29 if I had to peg it. And so someone asked me the other day when I was talking about something similar, they said, after 13 years and you not being a young guy, how do you keep the new paint smell? And I thought, well, that's, the new car smell, so to speak, in the business. And I had really, that gave me kind of pause, but I said, well, we've had the constant refresh of great young people to keep our thinking energized, to keep us relevant, to make sure our marketing is on point. And that's been the most fun for me. I mean, a lot of this is my extended family, and a lot of the young people that have rolled through there were students in the adjunct teaching I do at the U of A. And so it's been a great process of incubating talent that in some cases have gone off and done other amazing things in the area. So what's the news? Yeah, you want me to keep going? Okay. Give you an idea of the new stuff. So one of the things we realized as we went through all this was we were getting a lot of requests from large organizations, large nonprofits, healthcare systems, the flagships, where there was a real desire to take some of that lightning in a bottle and those toolkits and that mindset and the culture that comes from startups, and to infuse that into larger organizations. And these were sort of just accidental engagements that we decided to take because they looked like fun and it'd be interesting things to do. And after doing that for a while, the three of us who were in the leadership role said, well, we really need to launch a new brand that can capture a fee-oriented business for those larger businesses that could pay for our services, so that we can deliver to them the innovation, the acceleration, the advisory, the strategy work, and all these other tools that we've learned in kind of a meaningful way. So we launched in January of this year, Innovation Junkie. I mean, not necessarily a great time thinking about what was going on in February and March to launch a brand new brand, but we did. And you'll see some of the postings and different things out for Innovation Junkie as well. And one of the big client wins that we had there was after 2 years of having conversations with Barry Brady, who's an awesome guy at Arkansas Children's, and them wanting to be looked at nationally and globally as a recognized pediatric innovation center of excellence. We launched a program that was the first time anything like this had been done in the state, that not only includes the Startup Junkie team and the conductor team, it also includes Health Tech Arkansas that Jeff Stinson runs. It includes Sarah Goforth's group at the University of Arkansas Office of Entrepreneurship and Innovation, and Wayne Miller at the Venture Center. And we're the prime on it, but it's really a 3-year pathway to put Arkansas Children's in a place where they can be a center of innovation to really improve patient outcomes and change lives, even more so than what they do today. I mean, it's a fantastic organization already, but they're being extremely intentional about wanting to be the best of the best in a few key areas. And so that was a pretty good major win for us, a 3-year program we put in place, largely due to the efforts of Jeff Standrich and others. But we're having a lot of fun going through that process today. And it includes things like innovation sprints and hackathons, active participation in commercialization retreats, in discovery and benchmarking of best practices kind of across the country within pediatric innovation. And all that will culminate at some point into them having an internally nested fund, their own accelerator, being a preferred place for the best of the best in pediatric healthcare to come work and be successful. And so we're excited about that one. And that was a good win for this year. The other thing is, you can't really do what we do and just assume that somehow the legislators and the policymakers are going to get it and figure out what startups and small businesses should do. So in conjunction with the Kauffman Foundation, Tiffany Henry on our team spearheaded the development of an Arkansas entrepreneurship policy map. And this is 60 different recommendations that addresses a wide variety of issues, things like changing the definition of accredited investors, expanding opportunity zones to allow a deferment of ordinary operating income versus just capital gains, and a whole variety of things of how to make the entrepreneurial ecosystem more inclusive, more representative, and better in general. And we have shared this thing with the state with the congressional delegation, with the governor, and with others. We've used it to inform the work that we do with SSTI and the IAC groups, which are trying to influence national policy towards innovation and entrepreneurship. This was not something that we would immediately think would be in our charter, but we realized that we could continue to grind away here. And if we didn't have a national voice, we wouldn't be able to have the impact that we ultimately want to have. So this is something we put out earlier this year, and it can be readily available if any of you'd like to see it.
Yeah.
So the other thing is things that are happening in Conway. I mean, there's a transformation that's going on with the Conway City Hall. There has been an endowment to turn the existing Conway City Hall, or the legacy Conway City Hall, into the Arnold Innovation Center. So, and I'm going to make a couple points about this. Some of you know who this is named after, and he's an awesome guy. But the whole idea here is you get the community built around an innovation entrepreneurial ecosystem well in advance of building the building. A lot of times when we look at these projects and trying to get this sort of a network or community organized, the thought is, well, we got to build a building first. That's exactly the wrong order to do it in. You get the community together and a lot of activity, and then you've got the demand to actually fill up a building. So this Arnold Innovation Center, I believe, is going to be available sometime in late 2021, early 2022. But we're excited. After that will have been about 4 or 5 years of kind of working using existing UCA facilities, that there'll be a place to house the conductor activity and everything else that we do in Central Arkansas that's relevant to innovation. So we're excited about that. And I will say one thing, if someone were going to model how to get a city, the colleges, the chamber, and the large industry aligned in a particular metro area, Conway would be a great case study. The people in Conway work together as well as anybody I've ever seen anywhere in the country at any point. And so they really get things done down there, and it's been fun to be part of it.
Was that because of some culture there, that like a Richie Arnold who's real collaborative, or what do you
Yeah,
think that you had
I think it's people in key places. So Brad Lacey at the Chamber and Jamie Gates are just awesome people to work with. The college leadership has been incredible and well aligned. There's 3 colleges down there, and they all kind of get along. The city leadership, the business people at Axiom and others. I mean, it's just kind of a good environment where people figure out how to work together. It's in the DNA there. We've got a lot of that in NWA as well. But you've got 5 city states up here that are all kind of, I mean, it's a little bit like at times the council has done a good job of pulling that together, but it's different down there. It's one team kind of all working towards a common goal.
It feels great. All right. Thank you. Excuse me.
And then the Level Up program is something we're doing with USDA to really get to those Main Street businesses for peer-to-peer learning, weekly Zoom sessions. And by the way, all this stuff that I'm showing you here, aside from the Arnold Innovation Center, this is all happening virtually. We're not doing hardly anything live anymore. I mean, it's out of necessity. We've had to figure out how to make all this stuff work like everyone else over Zoom and Google Meet. One of the newest things we did came out in the press recently, actually in 2 different instances, was this Arkansas Korean Alliance. This is a culmination of a year's worth of work, spearheaded by our guy in Asia, Louis Diesel, who's a U of A grad, who's half Korean and had an American father. He's the absolute perfect guy to be putting this together. The whole idea is to build a bridge between the very vibrant venture ecosystem in Seoul, South Korea, and Northwest Arkansas. When Korean startup businesses, tech businesses, consumer packaged goods businesses think of the US, they tend to think of the coast. Silicon Valley, LA, New York, Boston. They don't think about Northwest Arkansas or Arkansas. We've changed that dynamic, and we were able to build an alliance with the Korea International Trade Association. They're funding a lot of the activity that we're working on. This will eventually be a 2-way bridge where we're sending really interesting Arkansas-based ventures to Korea as part of using that as a base for their Asian operations, and we'll continue to bring Korean ventures here. This first cohort, we selected 11 different, pretty mature early stage businesses. They've raised over 32 million in venture capital. They've got over 200 employees in aggregate. A bunch of them have really robust patent portfolios. They're in AI, retail tech, supply chain tech, food safety, cybersecurity. It's just really a great group. And our job is to make sure that their North American rollout goes smooth, because they haven't had experience in the market. And so this is a new one that we just got into that we're really excited about, and more to follow on that. We're beginning to do sort of desktop demos and introductions with the major enterprises in the area for these 11 companies, kind of as we speak. What that means is it stretches the team to where we're working a lot of times late into the night and early in the morning because of the time differences. So having essentially a 12, 13-hour time difference makes it pretty exciting to coordinate all these activities with busy schedules.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And here's the book. This is kind of the lead up to the book. It's something that had been on my mind for a long time. At one point, I thought I'd just slap together a bunch of blog posts and that would be a book that I'd push out. This is much more than that. This has been now a 1.5 years worth of work that's included Dr. Standrich, myself, and a bunch of members of the team and some outside researchers as well. This will launch actually in January. And the whole idea behind this, let's see if I can go on to the next one, is take these things that we've learned of the pillars and how we've done something over the course of the last 13 years in a place that wasn't historically identified as an area where a vibrant venture or entrepreneurial scene could be built, and try to inspire and motivate people in other unexpected flyover areas or unexpected places that if we could do it, they could certainly do it as well. So there's some inspiration, there's some education, and there's also some tools in there as well. And this is way too small to read, but building on the idea of having a lean canvas that you would do, or a business canvas that you would do for a given venture. This is a venture ecosystem building canvas of our own creation. We've aggregated a bunch of different questions and ways of looking at what you're trying to do in a given economy in a given area. And so this will be something that people will be able to readily use. If they buy the book, they get access to this, they go to the Creating Startup Junkie site, they can download it. So if you're in an area, a smaller area, rural area, or emerging area, and you don't have a lot of this kind of activity going on, this is a toolkit along with the book that can help you do what we did. And maybe at some point we expand to some of those areas, but if not, we'll send this book out and the tools out and let people have at it.
Beautiful. Awesome.
And the idea on a bunch of this is just start where you are. You know what I say? The foot stomper here is, again, to say, don't start with a building. So start where you are, build on the assets you have, figure out what the aspirations are for your given area or whatnot, and the constraints, and then get after it. I mean, the coalition of the willing that's willing to grind through this is the only way you can really do it successfully. This kind of gives a template for some of that. The 5 reminders, you know, these are the things that we've learned over the years. And I think these are kind of important points and the right way to do it. But it starts with having people that think it's important. I will tell all of you that had it not been for some of the early participants in Accelerate Arkansas, like Tim McFarland, there wouldn't be a venture ecosystem in the state. Tim, James Hendren, Jerry Adams, a bunch of folks got together nearly 20 years ago and rallied around the Millikan Institute report that kind of in a sobering way said, we'll be 49th or 50th on every list you'd want to measure unless we do something like this. And Tim and others had the insight, the foresight to really make something happen. And a lot of the rest of us have benefited from that early work since. And that's it. And there's the 3 managing directors for the team. That's Jeff Standrich with the glasses. I'm in the middle, and then Brett Amerine is functions as our COO, CFO, and he's integral to making sure that the trains run on time and that we do well in what we do. That was long-winded, but that's the story.
That's great. That's a great presentation, Jeff. Great. We got some time for a question or 2 or 3 or 4.
Let me see if I can exit out of this.
Very insightful, Jeff. And I knew you are doing a lot of cool things. I'd heard tidbits of it, but it's great to hear it presented all in one like that. I'm glad you did that, and great work. Dan Sanker, you got the first question or thought or input?
I didn't have one.
You don't have one? All right. Any questions?
Come on, Dan. Not even a sarcastic remark.
I'm working on it.
Okay.
You've heard all my questions and sarcastic remarks.
Right.
You know, it was interesting here back in 2000 when you looked at our economy, because it was all of us serving the flagship industries mainly. You know, no one really took much risk to go out and start their own venture. There just wasn't felt to be cool. You had the .com, bust, and everybody, venture capital was a bad word. Entrepreneurship had trouble spelling it and pronouncing it. At the time, had never heard the word hardly, seemed like, and I think when we did our first venture conference, we couldn't find 6 companies good enough to put up and ask for capital. We had all the capital coming from surrounding states because they got to have dinner with Warren Stevens the night before. But so we had a bunch of capital in, but we didn't have enough ventures, and it made us want to figure out why that was, what systemically was wrong, and that's what took us down that path to then form a group and eventually get some funding. John Lewis got $200,000 from the Winston Rockefeller Foundation, and we went out and hired Milken, and Uvalde said, let's hire you, but Milken, they're the ones got the microphone, and they're very talented, So we did that, and then loved having people like Jeff and Mike Smith and Ted Dickey. And Innovate Arkansas does a great. We need all of these entities to be able to build this. We need everyone participating, and we still don't have enough resources. Still need capital badly, right, Jeff?
Oh yeah.
The capital formation is still not there, and the deal flow is better and better. Jeff, how do you see the portfolio of ventures in Arkansas, the quality of them versus, say, over the years? Talk about that, please.
We've always had some really pretty interesting highlights, the exceptions. I would say the density matters, and so you've got to build that top of the funnel.
Right.
And we're getting better and better. We're attracting some of the stuff that Wayne Miller's doing with the fintech accelerators, which has now been nationally, globally recognized. It takes some of them coming in and deciding, geez, that's an awesome place to live, or to have an account management team So they locate here because of the customer access. It takes growing them. We're probably in better shape now, even with the pandemic, than we ever have been in terms of the breadth and depth of the teams and the talent that are here. And it's still a struggle. I mean, a lot of people say, well, at what point is this going to feel like Silicon Valley? I said, well, come back in 70 years, because it only took them 70 years to get there.
Right. Yeah.
It's a long march, and we're still in the early days of it. I mean, a real tangible way, 10 to 15 years into a 30-year march.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well put. Well put. Questions for Jeff or comments?
This is Shannon.
Shannon?
I don't have a question, but just a call out to Jeff and his group. I was one of the companies that was a part of a startup Junkie, I don't know, 2.0, like 7 years ago. And I've paid $0 to your organization from the support that you've given me. And anyway, my company tries to give back to Startup Junkie when we can to help your group out as a way to pay it forward and help the ecosystem here. But it is something really unique and special to Arkansas that as an entrepreneur, I wish I had during my first business venture and not my second and third. But thank you for the work that you and your team does. I think it's probably undervalued from those who haven't been into the realm of entrepreneurship and they don't really understand what it means from the outside. But as someone who's used your team and had a chance to connect over the past few years, it's just an incredible resource to those of us here who are not employed by, the largest companies in the area. So you really do fill a gap. So thank you for what you do.
Yeah,
Thank you, Shannon.
So true. So true.
And we're going to keep wearing you out with new Korean products, by the way.
Yeah. No, we're going to do it. There's like 3 items we want to bring over. So
yeah, I bet. Shannon's known for her Thailand imports lately, these days. Other questions or comments?
No, I could second that motion. When I started, I spent 20 years to build the business. I think I probably could have shaved off a couple of years in the beginning, and probably the thing that would be most helpful for a lot of the startup companies that I see are nobody ever understands the terms with private equity groups. And it's so hard. You're trying to run a business and nobody's there to really explain that to you, except for potentially other investors who have a horse in the race. So it's great to see. I mean, you guys have probably gone through how many companies in the last couple of years?
The stats show that we engage in 1,200 entrepreneurial meetings a year across the team. Now, some of those are repeats, but it would easily be 300 to 400 unique companies a year, every year for a bunch of years. So it's a lot. And some of those are idea stage, some of those are farther along, but it's a lot. It's a lot. The operating tempo is pretty high.
And the patience is amazing that you have, and the whole team has. Yeah. Because some of us that are smiling now have gone through some of that with other entrepreneurs, and the amount of it, they just oftentimes don't know very basic things or don't want to do the work. And you guys have made that possible for them. I think it's been amazing.
Yeah. Dan was venture backed. His company was venture backed in several rounds and it got him a good return at the end. And so Dan, what you're saying is if there's a startup Junkie in Santa Monica back when you started that, you might not have to eat the furniture that one period.
Yeah, not that really tough. Wasn't delicious.
And Dan tells us he ate the furniture there for a little while. That's how they got through a couple months, he said, but that's about what it takes sometimes. Anybody else? So Jeff, your venture fund, you need some more, I'm sure. You got a nice start, but.
Yeah, so Cadron, that was the other thing is we've been through the sort of member managed fund. We run the angel group. We had aspirations at one point that we were going to do a much bigger fund, 20 to 50, $100 million fund. I've come to the conclusion that we're much better at doing boutique funds where we don't have to deal with a bunch of institutional investors, but rather high net worth individuals. And so the Cadron Capital Partners Fund is a little less than $2 million. I think we've got 14 investments in there now. We tend to tag along in some much bigger rounds because of the fact that we have good access to clients that a lot of these ventures would like to get to. And so it's unique, and it feels like our spot. We'll probably do a follow-on, a Cadron 2 that will be in that same range and with the same model. And our portfolio from Gravity through Tonic to Cadron has gotten progressively better because your ability to size up deals and management teams and to make things happen for them improves with time. So
You bet.
I like it. I think we're going to keep it simple. I mean, there's other people that have been in the fund business before that are doing independent sponsor organizations and whatnot, where they'll essentially do spot deals where they'll do a $500,000 or $1 million raise for a particular company. We'll evaluate that as well, as whether or not that makes sense as a second act for Cadron, but we'll always play some role in it because I think we have to.
Didn't you share with me, Steve Brooks had that brought kind of refresh to what we could do relative to having 2 or 3 investors come together, one LLC kind of thing?
That's exactly what he's doing. And he's obviously very well schooled on SEC and state securities. And they've got an entity that he's put together that does that. And they all put their own money in, but then they'll bring other investors in, a special purpose vehicle for investment in a given deal. So there's some merit in that you can get people excited about a deal at a time rather than they invest in a blind pool and hope you know what you're doing.
Yeah. So. Yeah. That sounds interesting. I gotta love Steve's leadership there.
Absolutely.
Glad he's out doing what he's doing.
Do justice to what Jeff has done, I think, in a phone call, Zoom call. I mean, you're pretty humble about it, but you basically have touched about so many people's lives. Some of the businesses that are here are only here because you've done what you've done. The most dramatic thing is the commitment for the 20 plus years or whatever it's taking. It's amazing. I mean, my kids have been through an entrepreneurial program with you guys, and it's been, life-changing probably. The 2 companies that I've been part of have been part of all kinds of stuff. Anything from that stuff to helping companies with hardcore legal, private equity issues, to startup crawl drinking that creates a culture that sounds frivolous, but it creates this culture that we don't have naturally here, that organically, that we've been trying to make happen so long. There's no way to do justice to this conversation.
I think you're right. Jeff, quick question, and we'll wrap up.
Too nice, Dan. Thank you.
How many companies as startups, how many of them pivot or change their offering later rather dramatically?
9 out of 10.
Yeah, so I thought you'd say that.
Yeah, a lot.
Even Mo Vista, right? Even.
Yeah, I mean, we did this session, 3 sessions actually in the beginning of the pandemic, called Improvise, Adapt, and Overcome. And it's something that the Marines never really said that until Clint Eastwood said it in Heartbreak Ridge in that movie that he was in. Yeah. But now that's kind of a good mindset. If you think about it, the startups and the businesses that survive figure out how to do that well. When faced with really ridiculous obstacles, they figure out how to improvise, they adapt what's going to work, and ultimately they overcome that challenge. And most businesses have some sort of a pretty significant change in focus once they really understand where the heat and energy are in the market. And if you're smart, you pay attention to that. The better you are at listening to what the market wants. Not everybody can see around corners like Steve Jobs. So the rest of us have got to try to adapt to what the market wants.
Great point. Yeah, great point. Well, we appreciate you very much. Anybody else want to say anything before we wrap up? We do appreciate what you're doing, Jeff, you and your team. So keep it up and let us know how we can help. And we look forward to helping you get further up the ladder. I can't wait to see what it's going to be like 5 years from now. Startup Junkie and
stay tuned. We're not giving up. We're not going away. So we're glad to be here. Well,
and you got a good name in that Arnold building. I like that. Richie Arnold was a great one. So we thank the world of him. And you know what? Keith's on the call, Axiom, I tell you, the people, the professionals at Axiom are in the marketplace doing great things. Jeff Standridge, Keith, just they're all over. It's very impressive. You see more of them in ventures, growth ventures, Josh Smith, you know, than you do any other larger company, don't you, Jeff? By far.
No question. No
Yeah.
question about it. I mean, the more people we can get out of the flagships that have got energy and or looking for a second or third act, the better off we'll be. You don't want to lose that brain power, that's for sure.
Yeah, you know, Charles had a way of helping them get to think. So, you know, he delegated, I think Keith could tell us, but he allowed the people to, you know, learn how to make decisions and make within their departments, and you know, didn't make that all rigid, so they didn't have to think, which happens in the bigger companies, or make those big judgment calls relative to their business sector. All right. Well, thank you all. Appreciate you being here.
Thanks for having me, Tim.
About the tough news from Dr. Joe, but we need to deal with reality, and we have bright spots like Jeff and his group, and all of you to lead us to the other side. So thank you for your time, and if I don't see you all or talk to you, happy holidays, and appreciate you being with us today.
Thanks, Tim.
Thank
See
you,
y'all.
Jeff. Great job. Impressive.